This is Crisis of Infinite Opinions. I am your host, Honey. To my left is Miranda.
Hi, I'm DinoMightyMiranda, your friendly neighborhood amateur Batman historian.
Below me is Rena.
Hello, my name is Rena. I make way too long a video on way too short a platform.
And down below is Knight.
Hi, I'm Knight the Werewolf Teacher, fake werewolf, real teacher.
Today's topic of the video is, do members of superhero families need to stay under that banner or can they branch out?
So my opinion is that I would like to see them branch out. I would like to see superhero families become actual family trees. I used to LARP and I played a druid and we had this kind of teaching structure of apprenticeship, and we always wondered, like, when does one become a grandmaster? And eventually we decided that you became a grandmaster when your apprentice had their own apprentice. So when you had grand students, and like that's something we don't necessarily have. We haven't had a sidekick have a sidekick.
So my opinion in here is that I've been debating this all until literally when Honey said it in the recording, because I realized that I need this because I've said many times, I might have even said it on here, that I rank futures based off of how original they feel. And on one end it's Batman Jr. and Superman Jr., which is, we literally just did this again. Name them Clark Kent Jr. and also Bruce Wayne Jr. What are we doing? And then literally even Bruce Wayne is not named after his own father. And then on the other end is the real comics, like Justice Society 2 Justice League, in which there is a whole bunch of changes. And I think I literally said during the Crisis video that Barry Allen stayed dead for 20 something years, and when he died. And when Wally West died and Barry Allen took the mantle, he got 12 issues. And they're not even counted in the Flash legacy numbering. And that is because we have moved to this point where at some point in the 80s or 90s, this feeling of permanency set in, where we just people say nothing is forever in comics, but I say everything is indefinite. And we have moved to this point where the indefinite angle just stopped, right? We talked about X-Men, I was reading Krakoa, and I could not enjoy it until I just stopped caring about what the next writer would do. And this is the same case with everything. And I think part of the reason is because there's been some really bad decisions. If you don't like Azrael, if you didn't like Rick Grayson, you're just going to be holding out until the next writer undoes that, right? And I think this this mode of understanding has led to this view where we no longer continue ideas past, and we no longer have these revolutionary ideas because they don't stick around. Bart Allen can never become the Flash. And to fold it into what this is saying here, I don't think they're allowed to reach out, but I think it's very necessary. Otherwise, we're always just going to be hanging around Arthur Curry, Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent, Diana, Themyscira. And I don't want that. I don't enjoy that. I like when comics progress.
I agree with all of that. I agree with all of that. Part of the reason why I really enjoy superhero comic books, and specifically superhero comic books from the big two, is because it's a collaborative effort, right? You have these different teams that are working with these same characters, and who are then given hopefully in an ideal world they're given freedom to glomp onto a character and to spin them out, or to tell stories with that character in the main storyline, right? And so you have this system where a character might start off as a side character in one person's book, but then they get a spin-off, and then they're a main character in their own book, or they are a background character in a team book, or they're a dual protagonist in a different storyline entirely. And that is really magical for me. And I think when you start to have this idea that these side characters have to be limited by the main character they're attached to, then that really limits the world building, right? That really limits the universe you are existing in, right? If you say that no one who is associated with Batman can talk to any other character, right? You're not allowed to use those characters in different books, well, then that makes the world smaller, right? Because all of a sudden these people can never leave Gotham. You can't have a story where like where Robin is in Central City. You can't have a story where like Impulse, who theoretically can go anywhere he likes, right? Where like Impulse is dealing with the politics of like running over the ocean. Like that's like that for me is such part of the magic of comics and like superhero comics as like a collaborative medium, is the fact that these characters exist in a world in conversation with each other.
One other big deal I think it comes down to superhero families is spiritual legacies versus biological legacies, because DC and Marvel love to shoehorn in the bio-kid connection. Like, we just recently saw it in the recent comics with Hope Summers in the current X-Men event stuff, where they arbitrarily retconned that Hope Summers is now the daughter of Jean Grey, but like God. They had to arbitrarily shoehorn in more connection and relation to existing foundational characters rather than just having them be just spiritually connected or like emotionally adopted family members. Like, people talk about how, like, oh, Damian Wayne is the true heir to Batman's legacy because he's the biological son of Bruce Wayne, as opposed to Dick Grayson, who has multiple decades worth of stories about trying to step in and grow into the shoes as Batman's legacy. It's like, there's such an awkward double standard they have. Or like the recent comic with Tom King's fucking a Trinity character where he has to I'm gonna make my name and put my stamp. The blood
determinism of like these biological children, like this idea that just simply by sharing genetic markers with the hero, they're gonna grow up and like assume their name and like grow into their form.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Grant Morrison's fault. Grant Morrison kicked it off with Damian, and like, here's the thing. I think Damian has grown into a character that I can enjoy, but I think the philosophy that led to Damian, not even talking about the quality of that run, is flawed. Like, I think of Damian as a culmination of the will they, won't they of Thalia and Bruce, and Grant Morrison sees it as, finally, Batman has a kid. And then we get John, and then we get Trinity, and it keeps on getting worse.
And then we got John. We didn't just get John. We also got the fucking twins that now Superman has to adopt.
Okay, but those aren't bio kids.
They aren't bio kids, no, but they're adopted legally his kids situation. Because that's another thing. It's not just a matter of having a sidekick.
What's he supposed to do, honey? Leave them in War World? They're like 8.
Okay, but it's also.
No, I'm saying the creation of the kids in general was just a thing of. He needs to have children. He can't just have sidekicks that he's mentoring and training. Like, in the 90s, when Superman was mentoring Superboy, yes, they were genetically related through cloning, but he didn't have that father relationship with him. He just had a mentorship with him.
I will say with the Super Twins, at the very least, they are adopted, and so you don't have that blood determinism.
You don't have the blood determinism, but you have the legality of actually being somebody's parent and raising them in your home, and like it has to be somebody's kid. It can't just be somebody who's living in your spiritual legacy.
I get what Honey is saying. Let me see if I can rephrase that a bit. So, like, I think a unique element of the Flash family in the 90s was how it was not just a superhero family, but a family, right? Like, Impulse was the nephew of Wally, and that was a complicated dynamic. Barry left some big shoes to fill. Wally has a chip on his shoulder of not being Barry's actual biological nephew. Then the Tornado Twins meet him, and they have a chip on the shoulder for never actually meeting their dad. There's like a big part of this.
But I'd also bring up that Impulse's legacy isn't actually becoming, at the very least, during Impulse's run and before they decided to make him Kid Flash for some stupid reason, Impulse's whole dynamic was becoming Max Mercury's legacy. That was his legacy he was adopting.
It is a run. It's a world that observes the tension between literal, like, biological legacies and superhero legacies, and how often the closer you are to that, the less they want to be like their parent. That uniqueness, I feel, has been taken away in part because Impulse became Kid Flash and Flash, despite him explicitly saying he didn't want to be. Also, the other superhero families move closer to this biological connection that I felt was unique to the Flash. And it's not so much that it needs to be literal biological as it is this conflation of superhero families and like that and like real families, right? That like we have in Superman in the 90s, the superhero family is like a whole bunch of Supergirls that aren't at all connected to like Clark directly. You have Superboy, who was created like separate from Clark, and Clark has to deal with him after Superboy has already like put his roots through in a bit. Steel's there. Like there's a whole like the fact that you can do Reign of the Supermen itself is like this idea that Superman as an icon is so disconnected from that. This happens again in the New 52 when Superman dies, where Lex Luthor, Lana Lang, an alternate universe version of Superman, an all-new Superman, are all fiending for this legacy that aren't directly connected. And then you compare it to current Superman families. Superman, it's his cousin, it's his other cousin, it's his 3 kids. I will say Steel and Natasha are coming back, but they've been under focus lately.
I also miss when legacy characters had nothing actually to do, or maybe not even call them legacy characters, just call them like neighbors, I guess, where you have Steel, you have Huntress, you have Gangbuster, you have Argus, just characters who exist in the same city, same supporting characters. Rose and Thorn, another example of characters who they will fight in the city, and they will interact with the main character, but these are not their legacies. These are their own characters who are inspired by them to fight and help in the city, but they are not picking up their mantle. They are not caring about this. And as much as I consider Huntress part of the Bat family, even if I don't consider her part of the Wayne family.
But you did describe a superhero family. Like, a superhero family at its core is supposed to be theoretically disconnected, but they're still operating. I think we're more...
That's the thing.
Nightwing's
comics nowadays don't have the disconnect between the superhero family and the actual family, where like they can't comprehend the idea that Huntress is part of the Bat family because Huntress isn't biologically connected to. This is also why Stephanie Brown often gets shafted by the rest of the thing when they're talking about the Robins or they're talking about the Batgirls and such, because she has a dad, she has a mom, she has no way of actually making her Bruce's in any way connected kid, and so the writers don't know how to work with her as a legacy and member of the Bat family because she's not part of the Wayne family.
Well, that's actually it gives me a wonderful segue into my prime example of how like these characters, even when they're like being given their own shots, are not being allowed to flourish because somebody, and I'm looking very hard at certain writers and at editorial, like insists that they need to stay connected to that main character. Tim Seeley's Robin. Being Robin, Ghosts of Robin's Past, Robins with the $sign, Robins 2, The Squeakquel. In that book, it is a story that fundamentally misunderstands that each of the Robins relates to each other in a different way, completely separate from how they relate to Batman. It is a book that just assumes that the only thing that these 5 individuals have in common is that they all like learned how to throw a batarang by like a dude that didn't ever like figure out how to properly like express his big emotions.
Which is wild because Steph is connected to Batman through Tim. Like,
yep.
I got you've given me a great way to segue into what I was thinking about, which is I think Batman and Robin Eternal did a better examination of the relationship of Batman to the Robins than Tim Seeley's Robins run did, and it incorporates so many other members of the family so well. Where you have We Are Robin showing up, and you have Bluebird, who I believe should become Dick Grayson, should become Nightwing's sidekick. I want Bluebird to go to Bloodhaven, and this way, once again, the generations will actually happen, because we have this like conceptualization of the different generations of sidekicks, where you have Dick, Wally, and Donna, and then on the next level you have, honestly, Jason's kind of alone, and then you have Tim, Connor, Bart, Cassie, and actually
so alone they told him
other Cassie, Steph. That's not how generations actually work. That's just having different other kids. Yeah. I'm like, I want Bruce trained Dick, who is now training Harper, right? Who may eventually go find her own city that doesn't exist in the real world yet, and will then train somebody else.
The big thing there is the DC and Marvel refused to allow for their big name characters to actually grow up. They tried it with killing off Bruce in the late 2000s, and then they immediately
did not try it by killing him off. They didn't kill him off. They fucking sent him into the time stream.
Are we going to talk about how every episode, the killing of Bruce Wayne? Because I feel like we do.
Because he needs to die, Rena. Because he needs to die.
But like Marvel is such a problem because they still insist that Cyclops and Peter Parker are only 3 to 4 years older than Kitty Pryde, and that they are still in their late 20s, early 30s age demographic, rather than just acknowledge that these characters who debuted in the 60s and the 80s are old now.
Your complaint, honestly, not valid, because that's nothing. That is nothing. Can we talk about dead children, growing up while they're dead?
Oh god, I hate that so much.
Jason Todd, where, Jason, I know they tried to fuck the timeline back into place. Jason should be as old or younger than Tim. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. Was he dead for 20 seconds? Hickman sent Sync
6 months.
Technically speaking, Jason has somehow aged faster than everyone else, because Jason was only a year or two older than Tim when he died, and yet somehow he is closer to Dick's age, who was 5 to 6 years older. He was 6 to 9 years older than Jason when Jason debuted. And yet, somehow, Jason is consistently written as being closer to Dick's age than Tim's age.
Well, I think that's because of what Wolf was talking about. Because, Jason's so all alone that in the 2000s and the 2010s, they're like, what if we gave him Dick's friends? And so he started hanging around Donna and Kyle and Roy and Corey. And then it was oh, this is a problem. He can't be because in Pre-Crisis, he's their friend's little twerp brother. Donna needs to, when they're oh, the original Teen Titans are back and Dick isn't there, they just replaced it with the new Robin. They need to realize that, oh, this is a 12-year-old boy, we're grown adults, we need to look after him, not the other way around.
But also,
then in Final Crisis, one of Jason's ships is with Donna is very weird. Hickman Dropkick Sync the same issue he brought him back to life into a eternal time goes slower world, so they could throw a bunch of centuries on him, so they don't need to be look, I know he came back as an adult, but it doesn't really matter anymore. I know he was what the revolving door of Wolverine kids, my guys, there is not.
One of the weirdest examples of the age thing happening is in the issue where Gwenpool comes out as asexual. She has a whole bit where she tries to have a love triangle between herself, Elixir, and Wither, who are both Academy X characters. Wither dies in 2009 or so, and it doesn't come back until Krakoa age. Elixir lives the entire time, having gone through multiple story arcs and was a part of the MLF and everything right up until the Krakoa era happened. And yet, these two are written as being the same age as each other in a love triangle between them and Gwen.
It's especially because, like, if I'm not mistaken, if that happens before Hope comes back, Hope canonically is born and then comes back a year later. So at minimum in the X-Men timeline, there's 1 year past. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because time is stupid and everything is stupid, and I feel like this needs to get cut.
I would just like to point back. This is Gwenpool, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. But the conceit of Gwenpool is that she is a fan from basically our world, kind of ish, who has managed to get into the thing. So I will say, for her to try to get into a love triangle with some fictional characters from her, who are now to her kind of real, does kind of make sense.
The thing is, though, is that
if I were to try and get into a relationship with Dick Grayson, right? I'm not trying to get into a relationship with Dick Grayson from 1940.
The thing is that Gwen is canonically 19 years old. Wither was canonically like 16 when he died.
It is also like Gwenpool is doing a comp-het relationship, which, like, your comp-het love triangle being Wither and Elixir, like, show some self-respect, girl. But especially when you're talking about Alan Scott before the cast, and at least he chose like Harlequin. That's like a cool character. But
hey, I like Wither and Elixir.
That. But also, like, I don't know, this is the same girl who kind of pursued Sue Storm and like Reed Richards. Like, she goes after unattainable people. I do want to say she had a serious relationship with Quentin Quire, and when she breaks up, she says she only did it for essentially the views, and says maybe she should have dated America Chavez instead, which is wild. Quentin Quire's like 2002. America Chavez was like a 2000s character, but she's mostly considered like a 2010s character. Like, Quentin Quire, man, is whatever age the writers need him to be.
We're talking about X-Men because X-Men is loving teen books, but like Young Justice as a way for like Tim Drake and Impulse and Connell to actually have a book after all their runs were sort of coming to an end. Dick Grayson being allowed to thrive as his own character during Teen Titans. All these sidekicks, they almost never really get a chance to actually grow in their own like role as a sidekick or as a supporting character, because to do so is to imply that the characters that they're connected to are also aging, and we can't have Bruce Wayne ever age. And so Dick Grayson, the only way for Dick Grayson to age and grow up to be an adult is to put him in a separate, unrelated book that Bruce Wayne never shows up in.
I do have to say, I think we need to actually define the difference that we're talking about superhero family and branching out, because I feel like a lot of what we're describing is like still superhero families, which is, I think, like Nightwing for me is the only really successful example, because like Superboy and Robin having their own runs and really not being under the heel of Clark or Bruce are still very much in their superhero families, right? Nightwing not only changes his name to something that isn't Batman, not only thriving in like Nightwing, Dick Grayson may be a Batman character. Nightwing is a Teen Titans character, and it's not until the recent era where they kind of put, I think it's the changing of Robins really does some damage to him, because as they change Robins, like, of course Nightwing's going to be there and have opinions for it, and like it makes sense for when Bruce is gone, he takes up the role of Batman. But by taking up the role of Batman, he kind of just permanently put himself back in the Bat family. Like, they dragged him back in, and I think like Young Justice is a good way for them to branch out and have their own identity. But like, these were characters who were already capable of standing on their own 2 feet because they had solos. Their solos ended, but they were existing. And is that possible to work the same way for, like, I'm trying to think of a current sidekick. The second Aqua Girl, the Aqua Girl from the 2000s, who basically only existed in the pages of Aquaman and Teen Titans. I don't think so. I don't think that team book moved her away from Aquaman.
Mhm.
Though this is a bad example because I can't even remember her actual name because she doesn't matter.
Is it
Someone give me John. Yeah, John being in Super Sons or being on, was he on Teen Titans? Or being with the Legion.
He was on
He
Legion.
was sort of on Teen Titans. He wasn't officially on Teen Titans before he got like aged as like Damien's phone a friend.
Yeah, he showed up in
Like,
Super Sons where Damien would tease him about not being on the Teen Titans because he wasn't a teenager yet.
None of these really made me feel like he was farther away from Clark, and instead actually made him closer to Clark to the point where he became Superman. Similar thing with Wallace West, I think, is a better example of this, where he ended up working with Deathstroke for some fucking reason, and that didn't do anything. He ended up becoming more, and I think, in fact, the Teen Titans have kind of become a death pit for this, because it worked in the all-new Teen Titans era, where the Teen Titans were mostly original characters, when it was mostly focusing on Nightwing, when this character progression, the character progression came first, and then the mantle change came later, because editorial wanted to reuse those mantles, right? And, like, it was its own thing in its heyday. But when we get to the 2003, we're just swapping one legacy for another. But Young Justice is existing very much as its own thing. Like, people think Young Justice is like the sidekicks. It's not. It's those 8 people and their friends, right? Or 6 people and their friends. This is not, like, the Young Justice is not this kind of thing that can swap in and out like the Teen Titans. But when the Teen Titans 2003 comes along, they remove that originality and turn it into not legacies of Superman and Batman, but legacies of Dick Grayson and Starfire and Cyborg, because they are now in the legacy of the Teen Titans in a way that kind of deteriorates all of their characters into nothingness. But yeah, so to wrap this up, I think, like, at minimum, the Teen Titans no longer work this way, and I think team books only work if you're already advancing a character, and at best they will just make them more of a superhero family. They're not gonna make them their own. I think an example of their own thing is, like, really just Nightwing. Like, 90s Nightwing is the only thing I can think of that's like this.
I mean, I kind of disagree. I think that, like, part of the problem is no matter what, these are collaborative characters, right? Like, they're collaborative characters. If you put someone on a team book that is like a sidekick to another character, then you do have to, on some level, be collaborating with the creative team that is primarily using, like, that character, right? If you have like a Wonder Woman associated character in the Teen Titans, then you have to be in conversation with the team that's working on Wonder Woman with anything that you do with that character. What I think team books are really good for is, I think they're really good for introducing people to these characters, right? Because, like, I know that it is a bit of a controversial debate to say that, like, comic books are hard to get into, but they can be for some people, right? So it's like, if you start with one character in, like, a group of characters, right? You start with Batman. You really like Batman. Okay. You really like Nightwing. Cool. All right. How do you meet other superheroes? How do you get interested in other books that are not, like, connected to that? Well, you really like Nightwing. Okay. You read the Titans, not like the new Teen Titans. Is, like, as great as that one is, I don't think people are, like, a majority of people are digging all the way back into the 80s and 70s. Right? Okay, but you read, like, the Titan series. Okay, cool. You have now met Wally West. You have now met Donna Troy. You have now met Starfire and Raven and Beast Boy, and then you can branch off from there. I think that's what team books are really good for. Is it's for introducing people to a lot of different characters that then they can, like, decide, like, hey, this is new. I like this character. I want to read other things that they're in. It's good for generating buzz, which then can lead to that character, like, spinning off and getting greater agency away from, like, the main character that they're associated with.
Carol Ferris is a character who I need to get out of the clutches of Green Lantern. I need her to zoom as far as possible. And this isn't just, oh, Carol is a lesbian, oh, Carol needs to get away from Al. Those are both true. But it's more like, I think if you want an example of superhero families limiting creativity in the modern era rather than enhance creativity and made the world feel bigger, it's the Green Lantern Corps. It's the fact that this varied, like Green Lanterns have the potential for the most varied villains out of any of the main 7, because they're all aliens. They all do different things. I think only like Superman has more variety in this, in the potential. And then we all turn them into fucking glowing, right? And this push to make it's a family, right? Like the Corps isn't really a superhero family, but to say we have the main 4 Corpsmen, and then we also have Saint Walker, and then we also have Fatality and Star Sapphire and Sinestro. That starts being, in my opinion, like a family. Like, you start branching out, and it's bad. And it's I like some of them, right? I appreciate it, but it does mean that the stories we get about Star Sapphire are much less varied. There's a direct limitation to how much we can do about the Lanterns, and the Blue Lanterns are fully supplemental in every possible way. And so I would love to see, and I guess I'm also asking you guys, what characters you really want to answer this question, no longer be in a superhero family, to stand on their own 2 feet, to the point where 5 years later someone who comes into the comics say they're a Batman character, they're a Green Lantern character. Who do you want for that?
Another legacy character I would love to be removed from it at all is Donna Troy. Donna Troy is not benefiting at all by being tied to the Wonder Woman family. Her whole shtick every time she's in any type of thing related to her is, oh, what's Donna Troy's origin? It's so confusing. She has had opportunities to stretch out beyond Wonder Woman and have her own thing when she was a member of the Dark Stars, when she was part of the Kyle Rayner supporting cast. Donna Troy is a character who can completely remove herself from the Wonder family and be able to thrive, but they just refuse to let her.
The character that I would really like to just be permanently removed from the main character they were going to just always be associated to is Gwen Stacy. Gosh darn it. Please stop resurrecting the corpse of that poor woman. Or if you are going to do it, let her do something else. Anything else. I'm sorry. She did nothing wrong, all right? She does not deserve to be shackled to Peter Parker for the rest of her days.
I remember, not even the rest of her days, because she's been dead. One of my favorite bits is because John Romita Jr. is having, I'm going to say, issues with his art. I think his art is not as bad. But I think the Judgment Day tie-in is especially bad. And it's very funny. He's doing the cover, and Peter's just weeping on his knees, and Gwen is just standing there, fully dead face expression. She's just she wants to go back to the afterlife. She's done. And it's that kind of thing where comics do something so often, there is no way to fix it. With Ferrets.
Have the whole, if we're gonna have a gross love triangle, have the gross love triangle be the video game designer who is programming these drones, who moves in on her over Hal Jordan, the outdated fighter pilot.
I literally don't know what her fiance does, because it's not important. He's not an important character. But also, I was pitching the idea that they be topical and say, well, Boeing's fucking up. Why don't we get into the civilian business? We made civilian aircraft now. And with that, I'm so sorry. I know you gotta edit this.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on superhero families, I guess?
My final thoughts is superhero families are way more interesting when they're disconnected from the biological family of the characters and are more associated with just the shared city and connections. And even then, they work way better when it's more of a network of characters, like Superior Spider-Man being in San Francisco, when they're all in the exact same city and they're all biologically related to one another. It is so boring.
I really enjoy superhero families, but I like it when we understand that families are complicated and that families do not exist under one single character, right? I have my parents. I love my parents dearly. I have siblings. I love my siblings dearly. If I got into a massive fight with my parents, I would still have a relationship with my siblings. I think that is how superhero families should be used.
I think that the current issue of superhero families is an emergent property of the stagnation of comics, and I just kind of miss the era where like the two atoms had nothing to do with each other. I say that like I was around during that, and I don't know if it's possible, but I would like more characters to be introduced in necessarily superhero family and fully move on from that. Do a Nightwing approach. Also, specifically with Nightwing, stop making him like connected to the Bat family. Ability for a superhero to move out of their family is inversely proportional to how healthy that family is at a given moment, right? Like the Bat family is very strong, so Nightwing's trapped. The Superman family is very strong, so Con-El is now Power Girl's now a super fan member. Like Power Girl's a good example of that. I don't think Power Girl's a Superman character whatsoever.
No.
DC disagrees with me though.
She's a Justice League character. Justice League International, Justice League Europe, that's her thing.
Justice Society.
Justice Society.
So for me, I think Rena pointed out very well that Nightwing is the most successful of all of these branching out, and I would like him to, and many others, to be able to continue that success by actually forming families of their own. You know, is really kind of what I want. I want there to be, yes, Nightwing is part of the Bat family, but also there are now superheroes under the Nightwing family. You know, and I'd like that success for other superheroes.
Power Girl did do that. Because Power Girl has a second Power Girl, and she has like the third Terra, and like next to Harley. Damn, Power Girl needs to get out of Action Comics.
But okay. I think the last thing to round up is, was any of us a Bizarro this time around? I shall do the...
We have to guess first.
Oh, yes, we have to guess. I want to say, actually, I think Rena was still, was a Bizarro, yeah.
I don't think anyone was. I think we had very nuanced opinions that were kind of complex.
Oh, listen, I'm never going to be the person that guesses. Like, I don't think anyone was a Bizarro. I think everyone's genuine all the time.
Last time you guessed me, and I was.
Yeah, but that was like off of vibes. I didn't have any textual evidence.
I'm just saying, but also
I mean,
like
I'm guessing it's Rena based entirely off of
I
vibes
don't
right
think
now.
Actually, I think it's still consistent with what I know of Rena. Like I'm going for based on like what I know of your opinions on all of these, and I don't think any of us are Bizarros.
Part of it is I did say that I was still thinking of it until this very moment when we hit record, which means that like I may or may not have. I'm not saying, but like that my opinions are going to be more complex. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now
drum roll.
I won't do an actual drum roll this time because it completely destroyed the audio. But will a real Bizarro please stand up? Will a real Bizarro please stand up?
I'm not it. I'm just
okay. So there's no Bizarro this time around.
No Bizarro.
Leave.
Look, we're averaging one Bizarro an episode. That's
there wasn't a Bizarro though.
I thought that from the very beginning. Like I was like, oh, we all agree. Okay, that's a problem.
Yeah,
that's why we have a Bizarro, and it's like, oh god, we gotta.
That's why I assumed Rena was the Bizarro, because we disagreed the most between our opinions a lot of the time. So this was Crisis of Infinite Opinions, Episode 3. Tune in every month to check out what we're going to be happening. You can find me at Honeyham17 on Twitter, and here at Off the Shelf YouTube channel.
Well, if you would like to reach out to me directly, I am DinoMightyMiranda on TikTok. I'm your friendly neighborhood amateur Batman historian. Additionally, I also have a podcast, The Sidekick, spelled SEIDKICKS. Side is in dark side. Me and a friend, we talk about comic books every single week. We are currently going over our summer event, which is Night Terrors.
I'm Night the Werewolf Teacher, fake werewolf, real teacher. I can be found on TikTok, Threads, and now Tumblr at Werewolf Teacher on most of those things. Also, soon on this channel, I will be releasing video essays where I will be putting various comic and other media into conversation with themselves, practicing intertextuality.
And I'm Rena. You can find me at Rock Are Free. No S, just one rock. Rocks Are Free was taken. You You can also search it as I Listen to Much Ali and AJ, because that's the name of the account, not just the handle. On TikTok, I'm mostly doing TikTok. I'll post there more consistently. I also mostly appear in other people's stuff. Every Saturday, I'm on Ash and the Fantastic Friends podcast at 9 p.m. EST. And I also occasionally do lives with Miranda on Sundays, typically every other week, where we're going decade by decade for Batman and Green Lantern and talking about the trends we see in comics through them.
This hope see you all next month and see our continuing new content on this channel. Bye.
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 Bye.